On this edition of In the Gun, we have got a potential rule that could change the face of walk-ons across college football. We're also going to talk to our buddy Andrew Caridi and get a little scoop on all the excitement happening with the WVU baseball team and the farewell of Randy Mazey. All that on this edition of ITG.
Let's go!
You are now watching Believe. Do you believe?
Go single! Thomas nuts! Nuts!
ITG
With Wes, Owen, and Jed.
Oh!
There's nobody that hates Pitt in this world as much as I do. Pat Narduzzi, who's such a blowhard. Owen is the runaway beer truck known for having some fun.
250-pound lumbering Owen Schmidt, almost a folk hero here for West Virginia.
Had some moonshine, had the good vibes going.
Jed is the signal caller who is the X's and O's and the brainiac.
They come out in cover one. He kind of knew where he was going with the football because of the alignment of the safety.
Closely defended there, but a really nice throw by Garrett Green.
I love it!
You're in the right place. You are In the Gun.
Once you enter this family, there's no getting out.
In the Gun, episode 163 of your new favorite WVU football podcast. I'm Wesley Euler, flanked by the signal caller Jed Drenning here on this episode of ITG. And as always, we are brought to you in part by our friends at BetOnline, where the game starts. A fun edition of ITG here today. Jed, we're going to talk to our buddy Andrew Caridi. Of course, he's here, he's there, he's everywhere in the WVU broadcasting world, but specifically we want to talk to Andrew about another exciting run here for the WVU baseball team. The last year, kind of the final weeks here of the Randy Mazey era, and of course, JJ Weatherholt, who is going to find himself as one of the top picks in the Major League Baseball draft here in what, not too long, just a couple weeks, just a month or so time. So we've got a fun off-season edition, maybe a little around campus edition in some ways of ITG. But before we get to any and all of that and our buddy Andrew, Big Owen, we all know Jed. He kind of carved out his legacy at WVU. He began as a walk-on. It is, in a lot of ways, kind of part of the fabric, the backbone of college sports in general, but particularly college football. You think of all those famous stories, right, of walk-ons who went on to have legendary careers, everyone from Rudy and the beer truck and on in between, right? But some potential rule changes could be another one of those fabric of college football things that could be changing in front of us here.
Owen Schmidt to Stetson Bennett at Georgia. I mean, there is a long list when you look at the history of college football of former walk-ons who have earned their keep and went on to great things. And that might be at risk, maybe. Let's not put the cart before the horse, but Ross Dellinger, some great reporting on the part of Ross with Yahoo Sports. It was, I think, about a week ago, 6-7 days ago. But we're to that point of year where it's difficult to play catch up with some of these stories with what we going on in the other episodes. But what he reported on was there is a the leaders at the Power 5 conference level, Power 4 conference level now. They took place last week, and there were a lot of proposals on the table. One of the things they were discussing is a new athlete compensation model. Now, that new athlete compensation model was really one of three things that was the primary focus at this meeting. The three things they were looking at, it was circulated across administrative meetings throughout the course of last week. Now, this is all rooted in the notion that a settlement is going to have to take place with these various antitrust lawsuits. We don't talk about this a lot, but there's a lot of those lawsuits floating out there. And before you move on and figure out what the future is going to look like, you probably must necessarily first address those lawsuits. So threefold, like a milk stool, as Sheldon Cooper might say on The Big Bang Theory. Threefold.
Oh, boy.
First, you're looking at potentially a $2.9 billion compensation package and back damages to former players. That's part number one. Part number two, potentially a future revenue share model with the current athletes. And part number three, overhauling the NCAA scholarship structure. Now, that's what we get to here. There are roster limits across various sports Okay, but there are certainly scholarship limits at the football level. That's not the case with all sports. In other words, take for instance baseball at the major college level right now. You have 11.7 scholarships distributed across 32 players. So, what they'd be looking to do, football's the one that will take a haircut in terms of the number on the roster. Right now, there's a limit on football rosters that are 120. So typically you float between 110 and 120. And what's strange is the NCAA just recently expanded it from 110 to allow up to 120 for your pre-camp roster. With football, what would happen is they're saying you might reduce it down to 85 on the team, 85 to 95. But the difference would be all of them would be on scholarship. Now, let's go back to the baseball example. That could mean inversely with baseball. Now, none of these numbers have been figured out, but you might go from 11.7 scholarships on a roster of 32 to having 32 kids all on full scholarship. Does that
Right.
make sense?
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
each sport's going to be handled a little differently. But of course, what's getting all the headlines is on the football front. To do this, you would need to reduce the overall number of the players on the roster, not necessarily the scholarship number.
Sure.
So
Sure.
let's say you settle on that number of 85. You're no longer going to have 110 to 120 on the roster if this goes through in this form. A lot of ifs here. You would take it down to 85 and you would have all 85 potentially on scholarship. The school doesn't have to put them on scholarship. They could have 75 on scholarship and 10 not, but you would have a cap on the roster limit of 85. Now, what that would do is it would take you down to a more even playing field or level playing field with other levels of football being played. Like right now at the FCS level, the roster limit, not the scholarship limit, the roster limit is 85, and 63 of those kids can have some share of a scholarship. Take even West, the NFL. Right now, you have 53 on the active roster and 16 on the taxi squad, on the practice squad. So there's 69. So right now in college football, in some instances, you have cases where it's nearly twice that many. So this would reduce that number if, in fact, that does happen. Now, you might be wondering why. Well, there are a lot of answers, and we'll talk about it in future episodes. But the one that leaps to mind, a couple years ago, you had a situation of all places out in Provo, Utah, where BYU, from an NIL standpoint, had a locally owned protein and energy bar company. And what they did was they said, hey, what we're going to do is structure a deal to, in effect, put every player on the entire BYU football roster on scholarship with NIL money, including the walk-ons. They had, at the time, 123 kids on the BYU roster. They said, we're going to set this up in a way that you can do social media promotions for us. You can take part in experiential visits of this and that, as long as you're promoting our product. So, yes, the NCAA has a scholarship limit of 85, but that's kind of a workaround. You had an NIL situation at BYU where you basically had 123 kids on scholarship. Strangely enough, it didn't happen at Georgia, it didn't happen at Alabama, it happened at BYU. But that would be the concern moving forward in this new age of NIL that the NCAA has to look at and kind of keep their eye on. So you might have to figure out something in the middle of all these things we're talking about, but at least on the table at these meetings a week ago was the theoretical possibility of removing the walk-on situation as we know it, as we've always known it, and moving it down to a more manageable number with your overall roster. Like the NCAA has a handful of rules that address these types of things. I talked about the roster expansion recently that they allow, but also they have a weird rule like you're only allowed to play 70 kids in a game. Now that won't like come to, to even kind of have any bearing on it in a situation where maybe you're playing an FCS school and you're beating them by 60 and you dressed 115 or 120 for your first home game. Well, you can't play more than 70 in the game. So there's weird carve out rules like that. But this could potentially, based on Ross Nellinger's reporting, great job by Ross, if this does see the light of day, which some version of it I think is going to, it could lead to seismic change. And Wes, I'll toss it back to you with this. The number they're tossing around that could be distributed by the school to the athletes as early as 2025 is around 20 million bucks. It'll probably be a percentage instead of an actual raw number, so it can change with the rev as the revenue goes up. But normally after a collective bargaining situation, which this isn't quite yet, but after a collective bargaining takes place, the share of those on the CBA side, those on the player side, is usually much closer to half the money, 45, 50%. So I would have to think that's a conservative number out of the gate, but one of many, many, many things that will change before any of this gains purchase.
Well, it all happens quick, without a doubt. It's something that we'll keep you posted on. It's something we'll keep an eye on. But yeah, ongoing now with this ever-changing landscape of collegiate football, potentially some changes to rosters and the makeup of them and how that affects scholarships and your walk-ons as well, too. A big thank you to our friends at Toothman Ford for being a presenting sponsor of In the Gun. We all know cars cost less in Grafton. Big shout-out to JR and everybody there at Team Toothman. We're going to take a break. When we come back on the other side, our buddy Andrew Caridi is going to join us. A lot to get to with him. Plenty on the baseball team, little football thoughts as well, too, with one of the guys who'll be making his inaugural appearance here on the podcast, who actually helped form this trio here and get this podcast together about 2 years ago. We'll get into all of that with Andrew when we return on the other side. You are In the Gun.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
For more West Virginia Mountaineer football content, be sure to follow us on Twitter at In the Gun Podcast.
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
If you work the land, you just got to be a jack of all trades type. There's just too much to do. So if you got to be a welder or a farmer or a ditch digger, that's just who you are that day. Then tomorrow, you can be somebody else.
Get your Coyote at the new location of Johnston Equipment between Weston and Buchanan.
Back in the gun here, and we've got a special guest. I mean, listen, if you're a WVU fan, he's here, he's there, he's everywhere. You obviously know who Andrew Caridi is, but for those who don't, who might need an introduction, Director of Broadcasting for baseball and for women's basketball for WVU, I believe, correct, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. Andrew also does, again, a little bit of everything, some volleyball, some men's and women's soccer, some esports as well, too, right? A little bit of everything.
Bouncing around, you're making me sound more busy than I probably am, but yeah, it's a lot of stuff all the time, with the exception of 2 months, June and July, which we're getting close to.
That's right. This is the time of year that we can at least that we can breathe a little bit. But obviously, you'll be hitting the road here with the baseball team to head down to Fort Worth, close down the season in TCU, and then staying down there for a few days for the Big 12 tournament as well too. Let's just start bigger picture. I mean, another year here, second year in a row. You're in the hunt. You're down the stretch. You're playing really important baseball here at the time of the year. You want to be playing really important baseball. Man, this has been awesome to see them continue to build on the momentum that they started with last year.
Yeah, we're ridiculously lucky to be getting this, not only because it's Randy's last season, the last 2 seasons obviously is what it turned out to be, but just in general, man. I mean, attendance records, regionals, there was no precedent for that, at all. There was 96, and then he's able to do it a bunch in the last consecutive years, and people are now totally invested. So it's like when you saw the park built almost 10 years ago, it's fully paid off, right? So you're having just a great crowd, great atmosphere, and going out on top, man. That's the story of the season, and probably this season has gone by faster than last season. Maybe it's because of my second, but just same type of thing. Winning makes everything so much more fun than you look 2 months ago, and you're like, oh well, that happened, and now we're here.
Certainly.
Stay on topic with that, Andrew, and
Mhm.
walk us through as somebody who is close to the team, around the team, relationship obviously with Randy, with the skip. What was that final home series like? I mean, you just saw the emotion. Every video that was put out, I mean, it just reeked of just raw emotion with Coach Mazey, with Amanda, with the kids, obviously the team responding the way they did. What was that final home series like?
Yeah, I mean, I think exactly the way that you described. There are no perfect endings, but I legitimately think that we had one on Sunday. It didn't start all that good because you lost on Friday, and so you're kind of like, well, I never thought that we were going to lose that series, first of all. But in total, I think Friday and Saturday kind of get forgot. Like Saturday was a great win. Obviously, you put up a bunch of runs, and then that kind of carried the momentum into Sunday. But when it was all said and done, you finally got some good weather on Sunday. No rain, no yuckiness, and the weather was nice. The result was good. JJ Weatherholt hits a home run, puts you up 6-1. At that point, you can kind of cruise, and by the end of it, it was the perfect ending for everything that Randy's done here. Built the park, which was full, looked good, played fun baseball doing it. With a series win, you're in second place in the Big 12. All that combined into what he built into a perfect day. Like I wouldn't use that, but it's what it turned into. Is literally the perfect home ending for everything.
Andrew Caridi with us here in the gun, and AC. You and I go back a little ways, right? 2012, right, was your freshman year at WVU. Is that correct? Am I getting my years right?
13.
13. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's right, because that would have been my senior year, and that was your freshman year when you and I met at U92. So it would have been the second year in the Big 12. You and I in school there around the relative same time that WVU made the move to the Big 12, that Randy Mazey was hired to revamp this baseball team that was playing at Halley Field, that was a facility that a lot of high schools would have scoffed at, certainly. I shared this story with Jed here on the podcast a couple weeks ago. I remember either my junior or senior year, either first or second year that Mazey was the head coach, us hosting Pitt there at Halley Field. And there was like 800 people there, and that was a huge deal. It was like, oh my God, like, look how crowded it is here. That never happens. To as you laid out, I mean, getting over 4,000 people at games now. I mean, buddy, like, even if you would have told us back then in 2013-ish, hey, this is going to go really well, I don't know if any of us could have seen it going this well, to the facility that they play in now, to having a guy in JJ Weatherholt. I want to talk to you about him here in just a second. Having a guy who's going to be a top pick in the draft, co-Big 12 champions last year. Like, I think even amongst the most optimistic, amongst the most gung-ho of us, we wouldn't have expected this much growth in a decade. I mean, it's been crazy impressive.
Yeah, it's unprecedented. You guys tell me, you've been around it longer than I have. Wes not by much, but Jed by a good bit.
Yeah, get him.
No, but like what other precedent do we have in a sport growing like this?
I mean, what's funny is, and you could speak to this too, women's soccer and Nikki Izzo Brown.
Yeah.
I mean, when she took over, 30 years ago? I mean, I don't think it's been quite 30, but I think it's been 20 some.
Getting there. Yeah.
It was I mean, women's soccer was a club program.
Yeah.
I mean, now they win Big 12 titles. They played for the national championship in 2016. They put girls in the Olympics that are winning medals and playing in World Cups. I think there's I think there's some parallels there, honestly, and it's it's amazing.
Sure.
The thing about baseball that I find so remarkable with this is, when you're in West Virginia, there's always been a regional disadvantage from the climate, from the weather. It's more of a challenge to get up and running just to get a field that's manageable and serviceable enough with enough good practice days. You have to move indoors, and there's typically challenges that are unique to the sport of baseball in the state of West Virginia, whether at the high school level, the little league level, or moving up to this level. And to jump into a league as the easternmost team in a Southwestern league like the Big 12 and compete with those teams that traditionally are the powerhouses, produce the powerhouses, don't have those weather challenges and things that I just mentioned. That's what makes it kind of unique. Yes, soccer and Nikki Izzo Brown has done a tremendous job. And I think, Wes, you're onto something. That's probably the closest comparison we'll come up with. But soccer doesn't necessarily attendant to it's not those same challenges with weather and whatnot, right? That's what's so incredible what he's done with baseball. You just never got you couldn't even envision West Virginia as being a place that you could have a baseball vibe from because of that. And yet here we are.
Yeah, no, I mean you're exactly right. So I think Nikki got to WVU her first year. I don't know if that was their first season, but 95.
Okay.
I think was the first year, and then you get to a national championship.
This is gonna be like her 29th or 30th season.
Yeah,
That's
getting there.
Insane.
And you went to the national championship in 2016. So you're looking at like that's over the course of 20 years. And obviously Dale Ramsburg had some success, obviously, with WVU baseball. But to Jed's point, you needed to make a home run, frankly, grand slam hire, for lack of a better term. There literally isn't one when you knew you were going to the Big 12. So there were conversations that we were learning from the Zins who were here for the baseball series, like over the weekend. We talked to them, and then there were conversations being had. Randy will tell you this, that they were thinking about, like, when you got to the Big 12, like, do we do baseball? Like, baseball's not really a thing here. Like, are we going to cut this program? Is there enough interest? Is there, yada, yada, yada. Immediately that was kiboshed, but it was a grand slam hire because you needed to have a person who build programs. Randy Mazey, he'd been at East Carolina, familiar with the Big 12, TCU, obviously, from Johnstown, Pennsylvania, knows the climate, knows the area, and develops people and develops programs. Because like the overwhelming thing that you needed to have to make this thing work was a coach who valued relationships and people, and you weren't getting anything off the ground unless you could get the support from, not financially or anything like that, but have a belief, sell that belief, and then obviously be good at baseball at the same time. So I mean, I gave 4 reasons for a grand slam hire, but no, he did all that, and it's amazing, and that's why it's worked. That's been definitely a conversation being had by a lot of people, around it.
No doubt.
For the last couple of weeks, we had a 3-hour. He does a thing at Mondays, which is in Morgantown. It's like a radio show that's not a radio show, so it's not broadcast anywhere. But he gets a microphone, gets players, and we just chat. So we were there for 3 hours last night, just kind of living this all back, and that's awesome.
That's really cool. So I do have to ask, and you know what, I as you laid it out there, it is kind of fitting, I think, too, that this wraps up for him in Fort Worth, a place that he you mentioned what he did at East Carolina and then TCU, kind of fitting that he closes this down at TCU as well too. Talk to me about JJ Weatherholt. Obviously, like Jed knows, Jed laughs. I joke all the time, but JJ Weatherholt went to the same high school as me. So, I mean, my ego, I'm getting knocked down rapidly here, the list of most famous alumni, especially when he's a top 5 pick here in the draft in another month or so. I know you mentioned it. This is only your second year being the voice of the team. But again, you went to the university like I did. You've kind of had your eye on the athletic programs. You've got a history for it. Man, there's been the Manoas and the John Means that have come through. Jed Jorko, not too long ago, but this kid is just different. And Alec Manoa, highest draft pick ever in program history, 11th overall. I think JJ has a great chance to top that here in just a few weeks.
Yeah, you know how I knew JJ got legit and legit respect from everybody early and immediately is the people that coached with or played with Jed Jerko were like, JJ's really good. Like he's legit, and he is. He probably does more stuff than Jed, I guess, at the college level. Not to take anything away.
That full 5 tools, yeah.
Yeah, I think if you offered a Jed Jerko like we're in the majors right now, you'd say, yeah, if that's what's guaranteed, yeah, I'd probably take it. But no, yeah, 5-tool player, pro potential, crazy ability. He's got a pro personality in that he is self-aware of what he is, and is totally fine with it. Like, still completely himself, does everything he's supposed to do. Like, yeah, it's you look at him, you spend time around him, and be like, it makes sense.
Well, as we come down the stretch, you're heading to Fort Worth to wrap the regular season up with this series. Let's talk matchups, because now it's all about jockeying for position as the Big 12 tournament gets ready to be underway here. When you look at the best teams in the league, it's kind of intriguing from what West Virginia has managed to do. They always say in baseball, if you want to win at baseball, if you want to be a successful team at baseball, you have to be exceptional at home and play 500 baseball on the road. That's almost exactly what West Virginia has done this year. And when you look at the elite teams that are right up there with them, Oklahoma, obviously probably the cream of the crop in the Big 12. Well, guess what? We won a series against Oklahoma, lost a series against Oklahoma State, which isn't far behind. Texas is in the mix. From a matchup standpoint, when you look at the strengths and weaknesses of West Virginia and these other top-tier teams, what intrigues you the most, Andrew? In other words, who could provide the stiffest challenge if we get hot at the right time, come Big 12 tournament time, and make a run to try and win this thing?
It's a really good question. I think we got Oklahoma State early. They beat us 2 out of 3 when we weren't full strength. The JJ was still hurt. Logan was still hurt. Our pitching wasn't sorted out the way that it is right now. So I don't dislike a matchup against them in the Big 12 tournament. Texas, they hit a ton of home runs. They're super talented. Like, there's really nothing crazy about their game, but they have kind of inexplicable series losses this year. But everybody seems to kind of do that, especially Texas. And then, Oklahoma, they won the Big 12 championship, but they haven't won a series against the other top 4 teams in the league. So it's like, what do we really have here? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's really interesting. And you look at West Virginia statistically this year, they don't have a ERA that kicks ass. They don't have a batting average that is like whopping. We hit a lot of home runs. We've hit 80 home runs, which has definitely helped us. We're one off of the all-time single season record that we set last year. So we'll probably top that. We hit 7 home runs over the weekend. That's helped us a bunch. But I don't know.
Nobody was 25. I mean, it's spread across the lineup.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah, exactly. And so you get into the Big 12 tournament, and honestly, I think it's just who's hot. Like, X's and O's is difficult. You played so many games at this point, you kind of know what you have. Like, fortunately for West Virginia, if you go by the weekend series, for example, like, the pitching is finally stabilized. Hitting is still like kind of hot and cold, but you roll the dice with that. So it's more like a who's hotter type deal when you get to the Big 12 tournament. You look at what happened last year. You get swept by Texas, and then we got cold the wrong time. We lost 5 games in a row, 3 at Texas, and then 2 in the Big 12 tournament. So we're doing better than I think where we were at. Last year maybe, like, we won 2 out of 3 against Texas Tech, and I think this was our last home series last year. But we're not getting a Texas team that is trying to get a share of the title with winning games here. TCU is going to be fighting for, frankly, like a spot in the Big 12 tournament, because they get swept. You don't know what's going to happen. I don't think a regional's in the conversation, but they're really good at home. Last time I checked, they were 20-5 at home. So, like, it's not an easy task, for example, by any means. But yeah, I think everybody just wants to be playing good baseball when you get into the tournament, and then you kind of forget about numbers. I know that's like kind of a cop out, but at least from what I've picked up and the way that West Virginia plays, like, I'd rather be feeling good and like confident as opposed to putting up good numbers. But we have put up good numbers. Like, we scored 25 runs in our last 2 games at home. So I like not as a discredit to anything or credit to stuff, but it's like, you go into a weekend, you have no idea what's going to happen. Because, you know what I mean? There are just a million outcomes to a baseball game. That's kind of what I've just accepted. But the large sample size is what Jed alluded to. It looks pretty good for us. We just got to be and I think we're a better road team maybe a little bit this year than last year. Like, you take away the Texas Tech sweep, which was just a weird weekend. We're looking a lot better.
Games over 500.
Yeah, and healthy. Like, we've had JJ half the season. We missed the whole first half of the season. He's played 26, 27 games now, and we've played 50 games. So
you just hit it, Andrew. That any sport down the stretch comes down to the 2 H's.
Mm-hmm.
Who's hot, who's healthy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you just hit it. Yeah.
And you know what, too? And maybe – go ahead. I was just going to say maybe that, that experience that you mentioned, you're right. I maybe because I'd blacked it out from my mind, but forgot last year when WVU went down to Austin and got swept and then lost those 2 in the tournament to lose 5 straight. Hey, sometimes you got to you got to learn how to win sometimes, right? In crunch time and in those tough moments. Sometimes you got to take your lumps and you got to lose to learn how to win. Maybe with that experience still fresh in their mind last year of not having the finish down the stretch that they had.
No, for
Hopefully
sure.
that helps them this year.
For sure, and that's what Jed said. I mean, the healthy part couldn't be more overstated at this point. Because last year we had a pretty consistent lineup the whole year, and you go through a season of travel, homework, all that stuff, and your body's beaten to hell. It's gonna get like that, like no matter what. But the beginning part of this year is we leaned on a lot of freshmen in the bottom of the order. The Aaron Jamesons, the Spencer Barnett from Pittsburgh kid, by the way. Jameson's from Morgantown. Younger people at the bottom of the order, Michael Peraza, like freshmen to come in. So they kind of got the beef of the early parts. And then the guys who got healthy are the more experienced players that have played like the second half of the season. So they don't have a whole season of baggage hanging along with them. Pitching too, we like won a series without Aiden Major, who's kind of like our best, most talented pitcher maybe. So he'll be ready to go like full strength. So yeah, the healthy part is much different as opposed to last year. And we only went to Cincinnati, our last road series, which is bus ride there, bus ride back, not connecting flights, bing, bang, bang, where you lose, an entire day, wake up at 6, get there at 6 type deal, and then have to play the series before that. So that's huge. And we have a direct flight to Fort Worth. So we're not leaving until the ballpark until like a little before noon when we usually leave, sometimes like 6:30 in the morning. And that pays off. Like sleep,
no doubt,
for these kids in college, like you can't not, you know what I mean?
Listen,
So,
the only person
like,
I know,
I
the
have
only
more
person I
energy.
know,
I have-
the only person I know
yeah.
that can go without sleep is Jed. He's sitting on this podcast.
I can't do it. I just do it.
There you go.
It's not like I'm perfectly functional when I don't do it. I just don't do it. So, Andrew, we got to pivot before we let you go.
Yeah.
I'm going to test your metal here. Your dad can burn the candle from both ends and not miss a beat. So let's
Yeah.
pivot to football. Obviously, we missed you on the spring game
Yeah.
broadcast. You were off on your other job doing baseball. So, what intrigues you most about this 2024 Neil Brown West Virginia football team? A lot of production returning on the offensive side, a lot of new faces on the defensive side. What are you looking at? Or what will you be looking at once you wind baseball down? Is a better way of phrasing it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm looking towards the excitement that people are going to have towards the beginning of the season, the buildup of the season. I think we're in our best shape that we've been, for a while, and I think we're expected to make some noise this year in the conference and win a lot of games. So that's my favorite part about this year, and I think there's a reason to be. Garrett's numbers are pretty good when you stack them up, more than pretty good. I mean, they're great, you know that. Can he do that again this year? CJ Donaldson, Jaheim White. Are they going to do what they're going to do? Is the offensive line going to be able to support that Garrett Green, 2 guys in the backfield thing? Talent is there, yes. Are we going to be able to do it? So, like, the fun part for me is the unanswered questions. Everything's in place. I guess we'll find out pretty quickly, what we'll have. Or maybe we won't, because it seems like every weekend is different for the college football team. But I think we got a lot of pieces to do. So, and I think investment, as you know, is probably at an all-time high at this point for good reason.
Well, Jed, last year was Andrew's first year as part of the pregame show, correct?
Yeah. I was going to say I have one more question for him regarding that, Wes, but you go ahead and
Well, I was just going to say,
got.
I mean, hey, you bring young Andrew into the fold last year, and look at how things got turned around. All right, did a big 189 wins. All right, now we're going to continue that climb, baby.
So this past year is year 2. So
Okay,
that's right.
Yeah, so one before
that's
that.
Right. That's right. Because you started in 2022, right? It's summer of 2022.
I was going to say, Wes, I'll never forget.
Right around the same time this podcast started.
That's right. We were up in the booth at the time, Heinz Field. I guess it was. Had it changed to Acrisure yet? I don't remember when that happened.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever it might have been. It might have been Acrisure. But I remember sitting next to Andrew, and it's almost as though he was having an out-of-body experience with his mind. It's like everything from his neck down was the most fidgety thing you'd ever seen. I mean, he was shaking, he was moving, his hands were rubbing together. But everything from the neck up, which on radio is all that matters, was the most smooth, calm, relaxed. It was almost like he was a grizzled vet and it was his 10th straight season opener and he didn't miss a beat. So, Andrew, what I wanted to ask you, in the 2 years that we've now had a chance to do this with you as the host of the pregame show, the host of the postgame show, the role that you play in game, doing what you do at the half, what have been some of your more surprising memories over the course of being part of this now and jumping in on the crew that your dad's the crown jewel of?
First of all, I think you're exaggerating the Pitt game because I'm never going to go back and listen to that one ever again, just because for the obvious reasons. Well, not just because how the game ended, but just like in general. I'd never done one of those before. I got all the play-by-play experience in the world, but I didn't know how the ship was supposed to sail for one of the pregame, postgame things. So that took me a little bit to work up 5-6 games. And once I started to figure out how it was,
he's underestimating that, Wes. I'm telling you. He did not. We were all looking at each other like me and Coach Wallace were like, "Wow, look at this."
Hey, he's a
But
pro.
Go ahead,
Kid's
Andrew.
a pro.
Don't sell yourself short. Come on.
Anyways, I finally figured out how it was supposed to go, and then it's been a lot of fun since then. Memory wise, I was really hoping, man, if there was just like a disastrous outcome at Acrisure for the first game, I have to do the post game. That'd be really like unfortunate, and like that happened. I was like, oh my gosh. No, okay. So if I had to pick one, it was the Houston game last year, because I was in John with the booth. We were in there for 9 hours, like for road games. We were doing it remote. So I have a good feeling the entire fourth quarter. We're down whatever it was, like 2 scores at the time, and I was like, I feel fine. I really do feel fine about this. Like I think momentum's swinging our way. We go down. I didn't expect the Huddy touchdown, but we got it, and I was like, we needed one of those. Like that's gonna happen. And so I was good. I was excited, but I was totally even keel. I was just like, good, cool. Let's game's not over until clock's at 0. Like, so I barely celebrated the touchdown at all. I was just kind of like pacing around a little bit. I was like, all right, let's get a stop. And then that happened too. And I was just like, and that's why, like, I had no emotion whatsoever until the clock was going to hit 0. And that happened. And I was like, brutal, man. But that's the one that sticks out, to be honest.
Well, hopefully we'll get you one of those in the other direction here this season.
We're due. End on that. Hey,
we're due.
Tell us how you felt about the Baylor game.
That's right. Yeah. How about that goal line stand against Iowa State? Huh? Texas Tech. Yeah. Oh man, Andrew Caridi. Again, here, there, everywhere, but you hear him now as the voice of the WVU baseball team. Big home stretch here, final series with TCU, and then into the Big 12 tournament, and then hopefully beyond, on track to play beyond there. Make sure you're tuning in with young Andrew on ESPN Plus the entire way. A couple thank yous as we wrap this up. Thank you, of course, to our friend Rick Lewis and Fortis for roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed. You got to visit fortis.us.com. And a big shout out to our newest friends to the party here, Johnson Equipment. Make sure you're checking out their new location on Route 33, just outside of Weston. For, our producer, Skylar Callahan, the runaway beer truck, Owen Schmidt, our guest, the young prodigy, Andrew Caridi, the signal caller, Jed Drenning. I am Wesley Euler. The one thing we ask of you, as always, is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. Take care, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Let's go win one for the Gipper. Let's go win some more games here for Coach Mazey and keep it rolling. We'll talk to you next week. You've been In the Gun.
ITG.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback,
be sure to follow us on X at In the Gun Podcast.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
This mission is over. It's over.